Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the bonus episode of the Path Makers podcast. And in true bonus episode format, what we're going to do today is take a bit of a different approach. It's going to be a bit shorter. The idea is to kind of hit with some hard questions. Hope you're ready for it. And try and move things along to a couple of minutes for each question kind of thing, a little bit of back and forth, but keep things moving along, really engaging a flow to things. So that's the way it's going to work. I want to say, first and foremost, we've got to introduce the guest today. So thank you very much to Julian Bourne and Matt Pritchard for joining me today from two of the founders of Sellar. Thanks, guys.
Cheers for having us on.
Yeah. And I have to say, obviously, for myself, but also, I guess, from anyone who's enjoyed the podcast, the first 3 episodes so far, a massive thank you to you and the team for making this happen, because quite frankly, this wouldn't have happened without your support. So I really appreciate you guys taking a chance on supporting this.
You've done all the work. You put it all together.
Well, yeah, but wouldn't have happened without you. So thank you so much. You guys ready to get into it?
Yeah,
let's do it.
Amazing. All right, first question. You guys ready for this?
We'll find out.
All right, so you guys are about to launch Sellar distribution, right? So, and I think next week, if I'm not mistaken. Is that because you believe the traditional wholesale model is dead?
I think that's a very difficult question to answer. I think anyone trying to predict the future is, it's speculation, right? It's interesting conversation, but if you look at the reality of what's happening, I think in the last 5 years that we've been in the industry, we know one thing for sure, and that is that margins are thinner than ever. And so when we look at what's happening, we just see it as the way that distribution works today needs to change. And yeah, I think over the last 5 years, we've seen firsthand the struggle of the actual breweries that we've been working with, but we've also seen a lot of the struggle of those kind of old school distributors, right? Can they adapt? Yes. Will they need to adapt? I think so. But yeah, I think the way that the industry works in 5 years' time is going to be radically different to the way that it works today. Everyone's got an opinion on this, right? I mean, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would probably take a step back to go forward. So I think if you look at wholesale, like let's take it back 15 years ago, right? What was going on? You had breweries, a few breweries, not many, but a few breweries kind of around the country or dispersed around the country. And then what you had is you started to get these people that started to see craft beer and get really engaged with this thing of good beer, new beer, different beer. And they were congregating, of course, at home, maybe doing bottle shares, that kind of stuff. But going to places like the Hanging Bat, North Bar, the Rake down the road from here. And so there was almost like these hubs for that community to go to. But there was a real big need to connect those disparate breweries to those disparate hubs. And it made a lot of sense at that time for craft wholesale to play that role. But not just that, because, at the same time, it was all very early days. And so not a lot of people even knew what craft beer was. So that same wholesaler that was doing that connecting was also able to go down the road in those places and with the sales team, very professional, good salespeople and very professional, organized logistics and businesses, go and talk to people and sell people on this thing that was craft beer and all these great breweries. And so if you look back on that, you're like, that is such a perfect place for craft wholesale, right? And that's why there was such a boom in it, I think, because and it's really important to say that craft beer would not be where it is today without that, right? Not at all, right? It was incredibly important to create what we see today. But as you have said, and you guys, as you said, you've only really been in it for 5 years, but over the last 15 years, that has changed dramatically. And I think there's a few ways that has changed. One is competition, right? So if you're a wholesaler back at that time, you were fulfilling a need that didn't exist, right? There was no one doing that, right? Nowadays, you have breweries delivering direct. You have a lot of wholesalers, so competition even within wholesale. You've got breweries that were purchased by big global breweries that are now distributed everywhere. You've got courier, you've got seller, you've got all these things that are doing that in some way. The second thing is consumer. Back then, the wholesaler was doing an incredible job of creating the community by bringing new consumers into new accounts, but also new people into craft beer. Nowadays, a lot of people know what craft beer is. Right? The ones that can afford it, the ones that are passionate about it, they're into it. The ones that aren't, right? So there's still, don't get me wrong, that can still grow, but it's not going to double, triple like it was doing in that time. And then the third thing is margin. And I think, there's a couple of things that a wholesaler does, which is sell, like people selling. And then the other thing is logistically, like they're buying stock in advance, they're managing stock. There's a whole logistical part to it. And to your point, I think one of the things is back then, a brewery would happily spend whatever it was, 15, 20, 25% margin on that because it was a huge need at the time. But nowadays, when margin's tight, what's the value you place on that? And I think that's one of the key questions. So I think when you look at all that, my answer would be it's not dead. It's not dead. It still serves a purpose for some brands. Some people are trying to do certain things. Some people that might be more national. I don't think it'll go away. Having that touch point with a incredibly good salesperson and a wholesaler is still a very valuable thing for some bars and for some breweries. But like craft beer, probably there's too many for what the need is now. And for a lot of breweries, they won't see the value in spending that margin on that. So they're going to try and find other ways if they're available. So, and that's that evolution that you guys talk about. So evolution will have to happen 100%. I don't know what that looks like.
When you say like really great salespeople from, say, the wholesalers, like what your thought, like, do you not see the breweries as having like equal access to that same great sales talent?
100%, but it depends on where you're trying to sell. So if you're trying to sell, like a brewery will only have a certain amount of money to spend on a sales team. And quite frankly, probably I would advise people to be very careful on how much you spend on a sales team because in the UK, labor cost is very high, right? So you might have that in certain places, but if you're a brewery that wants to be national, then you're going to have what do you call it, white spots or spots that you're not covering, and having access to that with other means is an important thing. Not for everyone, don't get me wrong, because that's the difference, because there's not a lot of breweries that are doing that these days, but for some there is, right? So there is a role for that to play. What size is that role? Is it I don't think it's as big as it is today. Is it 50%? Is it 10%? I don't know.
Yeah. To be honest, I think the wholesale model makes perfect sense for the way that the industry operated like 10, 15 years ago, right? Like, again, we came into the space about 5.5 years ago. And I guess the way that we kind of understood the space to be operating was, new craft brewery pops up. They obviously haven't really made a name for themselves yet. They're never going to get representation through like those wholesalers. So they have to get started by selling to their local market. How do they do that? Like they have to, it's probably one of the founders that's going out, selling to the local pubs, bars, restaurants, bottle shops in the area. And maybe they're chucking kegs in the back of their car to do the deliveries, right? So that's how it starts. And maybe they grow and maybe they professionalize a little bit and they get a van and they're running sort of local routes. If you're going to grow, you obviously have to get that national reach, right? Like you're so limited in your local market in terms of the number of places that you can sell into. So to get growth, which is obviously what you need to to survive as a business, where do you go? It made perfect sense. You work with somebody who has storage, has logistics, has wheels, can help support your sales efforts, across the country, whether that's in certain regions, whether that's nationally. So yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. But I think the challenge that there is, which we've kind of already discussed, is just there isn't room for that anymore. So you need to find a new way as a brewery, I think, to scale like the higher margin direct sales.
100%. Yeah.
So that's the challenge, because as you say, I mean, scaling up a team, national team, that's going to be really difficult. 100%. You don't want to become a logistics company. You don't want to become a bank, which is where, as the amount of like accounts receivables and different accounts that you're working with scales up, you're basically managing a float, right? Like those are complicated things when you kind of set out to start a brewery, make great beer.
No, you're right, and that's why there's a bit of a evolution, a right sizing, and because you're right, what you're saying covers off, I think, where probably 70-80% of breweries sit, right? And there needs to be other solutions. But yeah, going back to the question, do I think it's dead? No, I don't. I think like very rarely are things that black and white. Like I'm Canadian, like BlackBerry, right? Was like the rage. I mean, BlackBerry only, I think, officially closed down their business about like 5 years ago, 4 years, not even, maybe 3 years ago, right? Like, but really, BlackBerry, there was a lot of problems in by 2000, right? So, like it is for craft beer today, I think the trend isn't in the right direction, but that doesn't mean that you can't evolve, right? But that being said, a big piece of the evolution needs to come from somewhere else, and that's why I like what you guys do, because I think you're tackling the things that you just said. Is like for most breweries, that model doesn't work for them. It doesn't, right? And so there needs to be new solutions. Yeah,
I mean, I think one of the things that kind of struck a chord with, Sellar shipping, to be honest, was what we found was most breweries that were around just did not have a seat at that table.
Yes.
So that they're massively underserved and underrepresented. So
especially when you consider that wholesalers are taking less risks, they probably want to stick with the brands that they know will sell through, the products they know will sell through.
Yeah. No, and goes back to their model, right? Is that that's kind of what you have to do in their place. You can't knock them for that, because that's how that model works.
Yeah.
But you're right, and that's another thing that we didn't touch on. But maybe for when the world is 100 breweries, it works. When it's 2,000 breweries, then yeah, exactly, right. So yeah, totally agree with that. Okay, so then on the back of that, you've got Sellar distribution. Like, how is that different? Why is that the right thing now?
Do you want to take this one, or should I?
I'm happy to take it. So I think one thing I like to start with is what's the same about Sellar distribution. And one of the things that we really want to make sure we keep is the same reliable, consolidated dray experience that wholesalers become synonymous with. So that's one thing that we want to keep. What's different fundamentally about Sellar distribution is that we don't have the overheads that traditional wholesale have. So we don't have big sales team going out selling the product. We don't have big warehouse. We're not stocking, millions of pounds worth of products. So what that means is fundamentally we can run the service at cost. We can run it about a third of the price of traditional wholesale. And what we can do with that is then give the margin back to where it belongs. We can give margin back to suppliers. Overall cost of the product to retail should come down as well. And I think the other point is that by not having the big warehouses and not having to buy and sit on the inventory, it means the full product range is available. So as opposed to it being a couple of SKUs from some brands, it can be every SKU from every brand. And I think that's really cool that everyone can participate.
I think for us, it was a case of this. I don't think we had this vision when we started Sellar, first of all. I think over the last 5 years, seeing firsthand what, people have struggled with, and, by trying to deliver a solution to the market, you hear everything that's good about it, you hear everything that's bad about it. We know that one of the things that pubs, bars, restaurants really value about the existing distribution model is the consolidation and the reliability of that dray, right? We have a lot of first-hand experience working with couriers, and I guess we came to the conclusion a few years in that it was only ever going to be a plaster over, the real solution. But we've also talked about, I guess, some of how the landscape has changed and how maybe that's put some pressure on this old model. So I guess the insight that we have is, can you provide that experience? Can you take what's good about that experience, but just offer that and cut out the rest of the cost, so that you can still meet that customer need? But I guess if you look at the model, for example, wholesalers, they buy and hold stock, right? So by buying and holding the stock, you're taking on the inventory risk. That is why a lot of breweries don't get a seat at the table, right? So the Sellar model, you don't have that inventory risk. We know what's in stock across the country. We don't have anywhere to store it. It's all at the individual breweries. So you don't pay for a big warehouse to house all the stock. I guess, again, you look at a wholesaler and they have those, big sales teams, big operations teams, big finance teams. Through the software that we've built, we could provide a lot of that same value, but do so in a way without the overhead. So what you're left with is any product listed where it can be delivered on a consolidated, reliable dray in the same way as a distributor, and that can all be done at a third of the cost. So yeah, I mean, that's what we're working on.
That's pretty good. So, and then is that saving then passed on to the brewery then? Is that the idea?
That's it, yeah. Okay. So it will cost the brewery about a third of what traditional wholesale costs, but the idea is that also it's available to anyone. They don't need to, they have that scalability from day one.
Yeah. Okay, so I know it's a bit different from what you just described, but Ibria was, I guess, a digital marketplace, online marketplace, and they described themselves as a national drinks distributor. So why didn't that work?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think the vision for Ibria was great, right? Every product can be available from every supplier, and it can be delivered without having to buy and store the products, right? Two fundamental issues, I think, why it didn't work so well. And one we're very familiar with, which is that couriers just simply aren't fit for purpose for the drinks industry. The issues that we saw essentially is that kegs are just heavy. They can't be easily transported by the couriers, and cans, bottles are fragile, right? But I think thirdly, the reliability of the couriers is just never going to be the same as direct delivery or a dray service where they come at a time when the pub wants them to come. They take away the empties. That's that same service level. I think there's customers that it obviously works for, right? Like there's a segment of the market that is like highly rotational, and they value so much just being able to get in like the weirdest, wackiest stuff that they kind of put up with the pain of couriers to because they need to. Yeah. Right. It's not because, but I think what you're kind of getting at is we kind of saw firsthand how couriers would only get you so far. But then you still need to have that that consolidation and reliability to really, I guess, solve the problem. It's interesting, the Ibria piece, because when we started Sellar, we obviously came across Ibria in like the research, and they were solving something quite different to us when we got started. And I guess the point that I'm making there is, despite the fact that that existed, there was still a need that we were tackling. And the way I kind of, I guess, summarize it is like, Ibria was great for those breweries that were underrepresented by traditional wholesale to access a market outside of their sort of locale. What Sellar was really built for in the first instance was more of like a like Shopify or like trade sales platform for everything that was happening within your direct delivery area, right? So, some of the aspects of, I remember the first brewery that we worked with, like when we came across Ibria, it was, well, why can't you just use this? Why doesn't this solve your problem? And well, they would never do their local deliveries through couriers, right? If they
if everything went through that, they wouldn't know who the customer was. And if they didn't know who the customer was, they wouldn't be able to edit their pricing or manage their payment terms, or, you know, even see who was ordering and how much, and, you know, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So there was a separate need that I think, you know, we solved. We obviously moved into helping out on the national delivery side with Sellar shipping. But I think that just complemented what we were already doing. Yeah, wow, you come in with the heat.
Couple of tough questions.
I mean, you sound like you don't think Sellar distribution is going to work.
No, not at all. Sorry, I do think it'll work. I don't mean it to come across that way. I think obviously we're, you know, trying to have the tough conversations because they're the right ones to have. But I think, you know, like I think, you know, it's obviously very hard for me to say if it'll work because ultimately, like, if it'll work is more of a answering what your ambition is with it. I don't know what the ambition is, so I don't know if it will work in your terms. But do I think it will work on paper? Do I think it makes sense? 100%, right? I think, you know, one of the things is if you look at the craft beer industry, obviously it is a very new industry, and I think sometimes we forget that for a lot of us that have been in it for a long time. And but, you know, 15 years is not very long, right? 15, 20, whatever you want to define it. And I think if you look at that, like, we really have had a first wave, and obviously, you know, times are more difficult now, and there'll be other waves to it. It'll be around for a long time. What that will look like, we don't know. And I think that in that first wave, one of the things is we had almost like really 95, 99% of breweries, like, people came out, and the focus, I think rightly so, has been on making good beer, really good beer in some cases, but focusing on good beer, so quality and in a lot of respects, brand and aesthetics, and very much focused on a consumer that is like a craft beer consumer, right? That core craft beer consumer. And I think if you to oversimplify it, I think if you look at most of the breweries that exist today, that's what they do, and that's where their focus is. And I don't say that in a negative way. I think that's a very positive thing. But I think if you look forward, and, you know, what's the next step? How do we get to the, you know, what's the next level of this whole thing? And I think what is needed is breweries and people that will help us think differently, right? Because I think if you look at who's succeeding today, because it's a tough time, who's succeeding today are the people that do those first things I mentioned incredibly well. So, you know, like the Colonels, the Red Willows, the Verdants, the Two Flints, you know, you name them. Like, the people that are doing that well are succeeding, right? The other thing that is succeeding is the people that have brought a little bit of a different thinking to things. So you have, like, you know, Bruce, who's going to be on the next episode from Left-Handed Giant. Like, Left-Handed Giant are incredibly good at hospitality, right? And they also own a lot of their assets. They've got real estate. That's different, right? You got Vault City, who I've worked with Steve for a couple of years now, and, you know, when they set out, I think nowadays they're very in the craft beer community, or at least most of it. But when they set out, it was kind of like they weren't necessarily accepted into craft beer because they were doing something that was very different, right? And then once people realized it was just really good and really fun, people kind of accepted them back in. And there's a host of different examples like that, maybe people that have stayed small and focus a lot on the local community. Those are the people that are succeeding now. But for people to succeed going forward, you know, being able to either pivot to new expertise or bring in people or work with products that bring in new expertise. So, for instance, you know, someone that I speak to quite often is Chris Lewington. I don't know if you guys know. Do you know Chris Lewington at all?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
You know, like someone like that who, at the end of the day, loves good beer, right? Loves good beer. But man, every brewer in this country should talk to that guy, because he will tell you how to save a boatload of money on things that you don't absolutely need to spend money on, like stuff that I don't understand, but like chiller science and water science and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, we need to be doing those things, because then that frees up money to do the things that we need to do to reach new audiences and pivot a little bit, and, you know, not be different than who we are today necessarily, but at least allow us to, you know, to spend a bit more in places that, or to save more money, or to spend more money in places that allow us to reach new consumers. And I think you guys are the same, right? Like I think what you're doing, like no one in breweries should be upset about cellar distribution. Everyone should be very happy about this because they don't have to use it, right? It's up to them. Everyone will make their choice on whether they think it's the right thing to do. But what you're doing is exactly what you said. You're taking things that are, you believe that these things are probably not worth the value people are paying in traditional route to market. So whatever you mentioned, stock, you mentioned sales teams, all that kind of stuff. And I agree with many of those things. And so don't spend that money there. I'm going to offer you a solution that allows you to do the things that you have to do, gives you access to the things that you might not have access to right now, but allows you to save that money. And that's a different way of thinking. And you guys are able to do that because your background is not beer, it's technology. It's a different way of thinking. And I think as a whole, we need to be really open to that kind of stuff because you always have a choice whether you want to do it or not as a brewery. But secondly, that's the kind of stuff that will allow us to free up funds to do things differently, et cetera. Another one that bugs me all the time, I don't think you guys will solve it, but I'll throw it at you anyway, is look at the keg situation, right? It's another one, right? Like, you got to use Kegstar in this country, pretty much, right?
Yeah. It's
one of the biggest costs to breweries, right?
Yeah.
So anyone that's coming with solutions to these problems, whether or not people choose to use them or not, but anyone who can bring a solution, I can't remember the name of the CO2 company from, I believe they're from Denmark, Dalmer. Anyway, they brought CO2 recovery. CO2 was a huge problem for many years, still is. And they brought an affordable solution to what previously you had to spend like £1 million to get a CO2 recovery solution. Great, right? Like, let's embrace all this stuff. And so, yeah, anyway, I've taken the long route to coming back to, do I think it will work? Yes, I do. What that looks like, I don't know. On paper, it sounds like an incredibly good solution that people should be supporting.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, with all these things, you find out, right? The market decides.
Of course,
whether
you guys know well enough
whether it's worth it. But I think, again, you come back to, you try and. I guess you try and focus less on the speculation and more on the signals. And one of the things I think for us from the very beginning of Sellar is did we know that we were going to get to where we got to? It's maybe not exactly here, but did we know that there was a problem that was worth going after and solving? And it was yes. So there's a hard problem. Let's run towards solving it, and will we figure it out? I mean, again, have we solved that first problem? Maybe. Will we solve this next problem? We think so, right?
Yeah.
But there's always people who will tell you it's not going to work. We've had that throughout,
of course.
since the very beginning.
It's funny. We talk about this analogy of we see a door where a problem is, and we open the door and we go into the room, and then there's another door.
It's just never ending.
Yeah.
There's a never ending number of problems that you can solve, and it's. I think what you're getting at there is because when we started, it was solving that, that kind of sales admin problem, and I guess,
just communicating availability.
Yeah, in its simplest form, it was like a digital online availability list. That was it. That was the first problem. You hear about the next problem, which was, right, how do I grow my sales out beyond my local area? It's okay, well, did the shipping thing, and it's the next problem you hear about is, it's just so difficult and expensive to find new customers. So we launched Sellar Market. I mean, earlier this year we launched a credit product. To be honest, that was a problem that we heard about from the very beginning, but we just weren't necessarily in a position to solve that yet. But I guess it's just a non-stop journey of being guided by your customers, people who are using your platform, what matters to them, what's keeping them up at night, and are we in a position where we can provide a solution? And that's it. And you kind of you follow that, and
cool.
Just keep
it's
going.
It's a good attitude. We need people like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so it feels like we've talked a little bit about cellar distribution, but maybe not so much about specifically what it is. So tell me a little bit what is cellar distribution? How does that actually work?
Well, I think cellar distribution is building on, the platform that we've already developed. So again, if you look at how you actually execute this new way of doing things where you take out all the bloat and you look at, well, what Sellar already has. The adding in the distribution piece is, it is just building what we've got. So, give you an example. We currently work with about 300 different drinks makers across the country. They use our platform to sell to their customers, and we know exactly what products they have in stock, where those products are across the country. Orders typically come in after the weekend, right? Sunday night, Monday. So by the close of play Monday, we know exactly who's ordered what and where it needs to go. So we can say to, brewery A, okay, you've got one pallet of this SKU, one pallet of that SKU, one pallet of this SKU. This is where it's going. You get it to that local cross-docking hub, and we'll consolidate that with, the pub's other orders, and then it goes out on that final mile dray. But you can't do that without having the platform that we've already built to understand, the ordering and what's available and where it needs to go. And don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, I think you answered that fine.
Okay, so then you have these hubs, you have dray, so you're delivering things, right? So, and kind of everything else is taken care of outside of it. So the brewery, the orders come in through the platform, the notifications go out to the breweries, this is what's being ordered, you've got to ship it to this hub or these hubs, and then you guys go out and you deliver that product at a third of the cost, essentially, of what traditional wholesale. Okay, so that's Sellar distribution. But what does that rollout look like now? Because you have one hub going live next week, is that right? And then where does it what's that, and where does it go from there?
Well, it's a funny one because we're starting in a way which seems counterintuitive to most people. So the first hub in Edinburgh will be doing local deliveries only, and the reason why we're starting with that is because we can collect and deliver at a really high efficiency. So most breweries in Edinburgh will actually probably be selling to a lot of the same customers. So it makes sense for us to just consolidate the orders that are already happening there and just start doing the deliveries. So the idea is by building efficiency in each region that we operate in locally, we can then tie the hubs together without going out with vans with 2-3 kegs in them.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, this was something that was a bit of a surprise. I don't think this is what we initially planned. But again, you talk to customers about this kind of vision or thing that you have, and you uncover, little nuggets of insights like this. So, when we're talking to breweries about, how much it was actually costing them to do, local deliveries, national deliveries, all these kinds of things, it turns out running their own local vans is
extremely expensive.
It's expensive. I mean, that's already costing a lot of people between 10 and 15%. So, but if you have a bunch of breweries that are all going out with half-filled vans to all the same places, there's obviously, by working together and sharing resource, there's efficiency to be gained there. That is essentially what has become the rollout plan, and that's what we're starting with next week. And as we grow out that sort of hub by hub model, you can then start layering in all the the national delivery. But
so then you link the hubs essentially afterwards.
Yeah. Correct. Okay. Yeah.
So what do we? So you guys are the goal is to take this national. Is that the idea?
By the end of next year.
By the end of next year. Okay. Awesome. Everyone heard that?
Assuming all goes to plan.
No, I know. I mean, obviously, a plan is a plan, right? So you see how it goes, and you go from there. But that's exciting, really, really cool stuff. So to close off the discussion, I think one thing is obviously we've talked a lot about the exciting stuff that's happening, but let's go way into the future, right? So you guys seem to be people that are, obviously young, fairly new into the industry, although you've learned a lot in 5.5 years. And ultimately you're on something that is, seems like a very, medium, long-term thing. So what is, you're sitting back, you guys, or we're sitting around for a pint in 10 to 20 years, and we're talking about it. How do you measure success? What does success mean for like Sellar in that kind of crazy long time period?
Oh, that's a big question.
That's a tough
That's
one.
a big one. I don't know. I think, look, Sellar started because we had some friends who ran a brewery and described their B2B sales as archaic and a ball ache. And we literally started the company to help them solve a problem. Everything that we do is about trying to help breweries succeed. So if in 10, 20 years time we see, a thriving like community of, craft drinks makers succeeding, and we've made it easier for, that community to succeed, that to me is the success.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd
So-
agree with that.
Yeah, just
That's a very good answer.
And to stay and to stay in business.
Well, I mean, that's the reality is for the last 5 years, that's how it's felt. I mean, that has been the struggle. That is what's at stake. So,
I meant for us to stay in business.
well,
For everyone.
For everyone.
For everyone to
For
stay
everyone.
in business. We all need to stay in business.
yeah, we do. Yeah, yeah, you're
Awesome.
not wrong.
Cool. And if someone wants to reach out to you to ask more, to talk about Sellar distribution, Sellar whatever, like what do they do? How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, best way is probably getting on the website. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, we're
Sellar.io.
easy to reach. It's Matt or Julian at Sellar.io.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'd love to have a chat with anyone who wants to talk about it.
Awesome. And you've got a great team as well. So I can.
We do. Very fortunately, it's no longer just the three of us. Things started going a lot better when it was not just the three of
That's
us
true.
anymore.
Amazing. Well,
Yeah.
thank you both for coming on today. And again, like, thanks. I can't thank you enough for the support and making this happen. And yeah, all the best. I'm really looking forward to, obviously, with working with Vault City. I've heard a little bit about the role that's about to come. We're excited to see that happen, but excited to see the full plan come out
Yeah.
over the next year.
Yeah, fingers crossed everything goes to plan, and
Amazing.
we'll see.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cool.